air and streaming on the web since 1996, this is Cinematic Sound.
And welcome to this special edition of Cinematic Sound Radio, where Jason Drury talks to composer Logan Austin, who has recently scored the new movie The Last Whistle, soon to be released in selected theaters and all VOD platforms on June 28th, 2019. The film tells the story of a high school football coach struggling with the aftermath of an on-field tragedy. On the show today, Logan talks about the film, how he scored it, and his future career ambitions. You'll also be hearing some of the music that he composed for the film. To find out more about the film, check them out at lastwhistlemovie.com, and to find out more information about Logan Austin, check him out at loganaustin.com. And now, Jason Drury.
I started our interview by asking Logan to tell us about The Last Whistle.
So I guess The Last Whistle really begins with Rob. So Rob Smat is a good friend of mine. We both went to USC's film school together. Rob and I are kind of similar backgrounds. We both grew up in kind of suburbs of large southern cities. I grew up in Peachtree City, which is a suburb of Atlanta, and he grew up kind of in the outskirts of Fort Worth, Texas. We both had a lot of interest in writing and in directing, very much skewed towards feature films. So, we were trading scripts on and off throughout all of college and talking about projects and doing little shorts together. But then he got very serious about raising a considerable budget for a film, that being The Last Whistle. And he raised about $150,000 for a budget for a first feature film directed at the age of, he would have been 23 when he was doing all this, which is pretty unheard of. He got 3 very good producers attached, Mike Downing, H. Max Gonzalez, and Thomas Kutzler, who a lot of the credit for this movie goes to them as well and their hard work. But Rob grew up playing high school football in Fort Worth, Texas, and for All Saints Episcopal School, which is the school that is shown in the movie, the jerseys that are worn, the Saints being the name of the actual school's mascot as well as in the movie. He came up with this story, this kind of tragic piece about a player passing away during a practice, which is a very real world problem, and about how the coach would respond to that. So it was inspired by true events, not a specific true event, but rather this general problem that exists, not just in football. Cheerleading has a problem with it, soccer, hockey, baseball, with these younger kids with these undiagnosed medical conditions that nobody knows about until one day a tragedy strikes. And then over the course of shooting and post-production, the DJ Durkin story at the University of Maryland really spiked up and actually kind of paralleled our movie in quite a few ways in terms of the legal ramifications. Because I remember Rob telling me once that he had gotten notes about certain things being unbelievable when they were actually the very things that were happening in a very real life parallel to this story. So that's kind of a short run on what The Last Whistle is.
How is the film's subject matter important to you?
I was never much of an athlete. I played roller hockey for a little while. I threw discus for a little while, but I was never a particularly skilled athlete. But I grew up from an athletic family, and my entire life I had been going to my brother's baseball games and seeing him play and seeing him and the other guys that lived in that world and just seeing how important the sport was to them. But then conversely, the kind of dark side of seeing people getting these serious injuries. I have another friend of mine, a hockey player, who got a pretty bad concussion in the past few years, and just the way that there's so much value to playing these sports, but also it can really just wreak havoc on a person's body, and kind of that the pain and dedication that goes with these is something that's been very interesting to me for a long time.
And how did you end up writing the score for the film?
So that was a fun little... Rob and I had talked about collaborations for years, but at the time, he didn't really think of me as a composer, because at school, I was a screenwriting major, and I would do music, but it was seen as something I kind of did on the side, whereas filmmaking was my true passion. But we started talking about The Last Whistle when he was kind of first raising the funds for it. And the big tonal reference he was thinking of for the music was the work that the Texas-based band Explosions in the Sky did for the television show / movie of Friday Night Lights. And not a lot of people are aware of this, but so they're in a genre of music called post-rock. And I've been a big fan of post-rock for many years, not just Explosions in the Sky, but Mogwai, Godspeed You Black Emperor, Tortoise. There's a lot of artists doing really interesting work in that space, kind of creating these very broad cinematic pieces, but using the instrumentation of rock and roll music. So I told Rob that I can make this soundtrack for you. Like, you may not believe it, but I 100% can. And he was a little hesitant at first, so he had me send over a sample, and he said he liked it. And actually, that particular sample wound up being pretty much without many changes. I mean, re-recorded it, of course, but in terms of the actual structure of it, pretty much barely changed. It's in the movie as the song that plays during the letter scene. And I think I did about 2 or 3 more sample tracks for him. Some just me playing alone on guitar, and some working with a loop pedal, which is something that for the ideation phase of composition I used quite a bit. It was a Boss loop pedal. And yeah, so eventually he said, okay, you're good to go. And he also brought me onto the project as a first assistant camera, a first AC. So I was actually also there for production, which many composers are not, as a general rule, are not there on set. I'm sure for something like La La Land with Justin Hurwitz, he was there more often than not. But it was useful because there are a number of scenes in the movie, such as with the drum line or with Sarah Boone, the singer, where we do have musicians on screen, and in those moments I got to act as a sort of music supervisor, kind of conducting the drum line and providing pitches for the singer. And that was fun to be able to be involved with that on set as well as in the post-production process.
How did you go about scoring the film?
So I had taken some composition classes while at USC and really learned quite a bit from Professor Sarah Gibson, who's a very talented composer who's based in Los Angeles, but is actually also from Georgia. So what I kind of focused on was coming up with a few themes that kind of recur throughout the film. There's one melodic motif in particular that appears in a lot of the songs. It's kind of a pickup motif. And it's, so the very first track of Underscore that you hear in the movie during the football game, it is the melodic motif that connects from the kind of broad opening to the intense portion when the play is run. And that track is called It's All You. Kind of developing these melodic motifs that kind of recur in different forms, and they kind of change depending on context. There's one melodic motif that is first introduced during the gassers scene, which is when Benny's heart condition flares up while they're running sprints, and in that form, it's for a very dissonant, kind of processed electric guitar sound, and it's in a minor key. And then by the end of the film, in some of the final tracks, that same motif has recurred, but it is now in a clean electric guitar, and it's been transposed to a major key. So keeping track of that, and then certain situations are given their own sort of more unique themes, like the courtroom is given its own theme. All the scenes with his daughter are given their own unique theme. One interesting element of this movie that I was very excited to work with is the fact that there's quite a few pieces of underscore, the instrumental sound work, but there's also a number of scenes set at a country roadhouse bar, which was the Lonesome Dove in Fort Worth, which is where we got to work with Jim O'Hare from Parks and Recreation and Les Miles, the LSU coach, or now Kansas coach, as well as, of course, our star, Brad Leland. So for those, we thought we would need something diegetic, some songs that existed within the world of the movie, and we wanted to use kind of country western songs. So one in particular that we used was Streets of Laredo, which is an old cowboy song that Johnny Cash has covered, Marty Robbins has covered. It's just kind of an iconic Western song. And when I knew we were doing a movie about a young person dying in Texas, that song immediately popped into mind because that's what it is, about a young cowboy passing away. There's a vocal version of that song that appears in the bar, and then there's actually an instrumental jazz combo version that appears in the dinner scene when the coach eats dinner with one of his former players towards the end of the film. That's also when I got to write two original tracks for the film. One is called God is from Atlanta, which is a simple kind of country song, very much inspired by the song Laura by Bat for Lashes, if that's a reference for the audience. And then the one that I'm most proud of is called You Can't Say That Dallas Doesn't Love You, which is kind of an oddity, but one that I'm very proud of. So Rob and I both have a very strong kind of cult fascination with the Kennedy assassination. And actually, when we were in Dallas for the premiere of the film, we went to Dealey Plaza to kind of just tour the space, checked out the grassy knoll and so on. And the song is a duet between me as singer and this girl, Eliana Dubin, who I met through a friend who's a very talented soprano. We're singing in character as John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy. And an instrumental version of it plays during the end credits after the Pat Green song that opens the credits. And it plays, I believe, twice during the diegesis of the film itself. It was very fun to be able to work within these vocal spaces as well as the more broad instrumental work that defines the sound of most of the film.
Goodbye, my Lancer.
Goodbye, my lace.
I hope that I see you.
Name a time and a place. I wish it were that easy.
But the trigger has been pulled.
I still feel so young.
But the kids are so old. Someday we'll get there and you'll just have to wait.
I hope that I'm very far away from this stage.
I've kept all your secrets.
I've forgiven your regrets. There's just that one thing I hope that you don't forget. Say that Dallas doesn't love you. Say that Dallas doesn't care. Can't say that Dallas doesn't love you. Can't say that Dallas doesn't care.
There's two other songs that were not by me. They were by Chelly, who kind of goes mononymously by that name, and he's one of the actors in the movie. He plays Ford, the quarterback of the football team. Because one thing that I was concerned with the soundtrack was this kind of timeless feeling, because while the movie is technically set in the modern day, there's a lot of elements to it that make it feel older. Like, he uses a corded telephone. He gets his mail delivered by a paper boy, which I also happen to play the paper boy. Stay tuned for my cameo. So going for that kind of older, mid-20th century American sound was something that I really was looking for with a lot of the soundtrack, with the kind of recording quality of it. Then Chelly's songs played more often than not in these scenes with the younger players, and it kind of establishes like these players are kind of living in a different world than Coach Victor in terms of like their era and their values to some extent.
Now, listening to the score, I noticed that it is mainly composed for electric guitar. Is that you performing it?
So yes, that was me performing the guitar in the score. Actually, with the exceptions of the Pat Green song and the two Chelly tracks, all of the instrumentation of the movie was either directly performed by me or, in the case of MIDI instruments, arranged by me. So I actually played guitar, both electric and acoustic, the electric bass, the drums, the piano, the saxophone for one track, and the vocals for some of the two vocal songs I'm featured on for the score. I was kind of torn between two different creative methodologies for the film. I think the score really started to work when I got to mixing the two of them together. On the one end, there was this very kind of regimented composing style where I was working within Finale, the software, and I was kind of imitating a loop pedal just by habit, which is because I had done so much of the prep work for this film. I was taking these repeating patterns and just building on top of them without necessarily altering the pattern. So looking at like Your Hand in Mine by Explosions in the Sky as an example of a track similar to that, it begins with a pretty simple pattern in 3/4, and then another layer is added on top of that. And then the other direction I was coming from was just getting the instrument and kind of playing by feel and not necessarily being tied to that regimented structure. So, for example, the track Practice from the soundtrack was entirely a feel-based piece. I never wrote down a single note of what is played in there. I just had a sense of it in my head, and I just kept doing takes of it. I was working with a volume pedal for that track in particular, and that added dimension of expressivity is something that I really enjoyed. It allowed for a lot of tenderness for that track. And I found that when I was playing freely, I could put a lot more emotion and tenderness into the songs. But when I was working in the more regimented Finale structure, I could have a lot more direction to the songs. And the score really started coming together for me when I started merging those two approaches. And I had one realization in particular that totally transformed the way I was working. And it actually came from my screenwriting background. So within screenwriting, it said that not only does your entire story serve an arc, but each individual scene should have an arc. Like, if there is a defined change between the opening of a scene and the closing of a scene, otherwise there's essentially no point for the scene. So when I realized that, the songs sort of had to take on an arc of their own. You're kind of establishing something and changing it, rather than just generating a pattern and iterating it over and over again. The goal, of course, was to complement the film itself as well as possible. There were some tracks that I, kind of in my own pride, would have liked to run longer and longer. And he was right that we needed to cut those tracks down or simplify them in order to serve the scene, because that's the real purpose of the film. And learning that was an important part of the soundtrack process for me.
Logan, how did you get into film scoring?
Well, on a certain level, it was kind of functional because, so I went to USC's film school and you're required to do a lot of filmmaking while you're there, more so if you're a production major, which I was not, but I took a lot of production classes. And I also I've done the Atlanta 48-hour film project 5 times now. And for all of these, you need music for them, and you might not know a composer, and you don't want to use a free sound library, even though Kevin MacLeod has great tracks. And you kind of realize that, well, I know the basics, I can do my best at it. So the first project I ever did music for was a horror short we did, I guess this was 5 years ago now. And horror was fun because it's a lot looser rules. You can just get very bizarre with the techniques you're using, distortion and processing and reversal. That was very fun. And then I kind of just experimented more with other projects, like how can I do the music for this one? How can I do the music for that one? What new can I do that I haven't done before? What sounds can I involve in this? It just kind of grew from there. And then taking the composition classes my senior year of college. So that was actually a project I did called Prodigy, which was a feature film made for almost no budget, which was in retrospect a bit of a mistake. But I had written it and directed it in my hometown of Peachtree City, Georgia, and I didn't have a score for it. And I was in the final stages of editing. Coincidentally, I enrolled in this was my second semester in composition for non-majors, and there were actually only 3 of us in the class. And the professor, Sarah Gibson, told us that we could do essentially whatever we wanted for our final as long as she approved of it. And I told her, I have this movie and I would like to do the score for it. And she approved it, and essentially it meant I was working with a very skilled one-on-one tutor for the remainder of that project, and it would not have turned out as well as it did without her. And just in general, the amount with which my kind of sensibility of what works and what doesn't work as a composer, it would be nothing without that class.
Now, you worked on this project as first assistant camera, as you said earlier, and you've already directed some projects in the past. Do you see yourself first as a future director, a future film composer, or both?
For my future, I would see myself working as both. They both have so much interest to me, and I would love the opportunity to pursue either one of them independently or both in John Carpenter style combination. But in all honesty, I'm 24 and the film industry is kind of a difficult place to break into. So all in all, I'm happy for any kind of work. I'm also happy to do below the line work. I've worked in camera departments, lighting departments for different productions, office work, but directing and composing and writing, of course, are the 3 things that I have the most interest in doing long term for what I would get the most creative fulfillment out of.
Do you have any musical influences?
In terms of my writing at large, I don't know if I could say there's any artists that inform everything. I definitely, for individual projects, will find certain works that inspire me. For The Last Whistle in particular, Rob really wanted the tonal reference of Explosions in the Sky. And then there's a lot of work in that similar field. Khaki King is an American guitarist who's actually also from Atlanta, and she is just a phenomenal composer. She did quite a bit of work on the film August Rush, as well as the movie Into the Wild. Just very impressive stuff, especially for working within the guitar space. On the songwriting end, I mean, there's a million people that have influenced that. Johnny Cash, Joni Mitchell, Willie Nelson, Mitski for a modern reference. Some of the film scores I look at as just really phenomenally impressive. Carter Burwell's score for Carol is one that I've looked at quite a bit. Thomas Newman's score for American Beauty. And then kind of recently I've been looking into more synthesizer-based work. So things like Andrew's work on Me and You and Everyone We Know, Anna Meredith's work on 8th Grade, John Bryan's work for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, kind of incorporating digital elements into what is still an emotive, powerful score has been interesting to me as of late with a new project that I'm working on. And kind of how do you bridge the organic instruments with more digital sounds to good effect.
And concerning your work behind the camera, what directorial influences do you have?
Okay, Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig, and Alexander Payne, just the work they do, just tightrope they walk between satire and just earnest character pieces is very powerful to me. On a larger scale, I would love to say someone like a Robert Altman or a Paul Thomas Anderson, a Pedro Almodovar and Alfonso Cuarón, but those are bold claims to make and would require a lot more success on my end to be able to kind of approach that level, which, perhaps someday. But for now, I just really love working on these very small scale kind of human character study pieces. Baumbach, Gerwig, Payne, Swanberg, Linklater definitely is a big one for me, would be the ones that I look up to a lot.
And which future projects have you lined up?
The current project I'm working on, or on finishing up right now, is called My Tinder with Andre, which is inspired by Louis Malle's My Dinner with Andre. And the entire film follows just two people on a first date. And there's not particularly much in terms of a soundtrack there. The songs are all, with two exceptions, they're all pretty much songs that exist within the universe of the movie. So it was a focus on diegesis and kind of constructing music in the way that we ourselves experience in our day-to-day lives, and kind of feeling that very naturalistic style. Oh yeah, I want to take a moment here to just shout out Charlie Moody, who is the Last Whistle sound mixer, and Carter Forearm, the film's editor. Working with those two guys in particular was just a blessing. Going to the premiere with them, they're just two of the best guys, and I really hope to work with them again someday. So anywho, finishing the Tinder movie, I have a music video shoot planned with a band, the Brown Mountain Lightning Bugs, which is a North Carolina band. The guitarist is actually my cousin, and I'm using some of their songs in the Tinder movie. So that will be happening sometime this fall, I believe. I don't want to give too much away, but so Rob has another script that he is looking at developing that's similar to The Last Whistle, but with a different tack, and I would love to work with him on that if he'd be willing to have me again. And then conversely, I have another project that I'm developing and looking to raise funds for right now. It's a character study piece. It has science fiction elements, and great deal of the characters in the movie are musicians themselves. So I would be directing that project.
And finally, when can we see The Last Whistle?
So The Last Whistle will be coming out in 10 American cities in theaters. I don't think I'm allowed yet to say which theaters those are, or which cities those are yet. And it will also be available on all digital platforms. So your iTunes, your Amazon, your YouTube. On June 28th, it will be available. And I highly recommend anyone with an interest to go see it and to get the word out and tell their friends, because I do really believe this is a very good movie. It's a very powerful movie. And I just hope that it can be a part of people's lives in some way, that they can see it and enjoy it.
And is there a release planned for the UK?
Yes, it'll be on iTunes and YouTube internationally. It will not, unfortunately, as of now, it will not be screening in the UK theatrically. Although we'll see if this US run goes well.
Logan Austin, many thanks for joining us, and I wish you and the film The Last Whistle every success. Thank you for joining us. I do hope you enjoyed today's show. I'll leave you with more music from Logan Austin's score for The Last Whistle. And until we meet again, from me, Jason Drury, is take care and happy listening.
Thank you for listening to Cinematic Sound Radio. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. Don't forget to check us out at cinematicsound.net on the web, CinSound Radio on Twitter, and Cinematic Sound on Facebook. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment right now to rate and review the show. It really helps get the show noticed. And don't forget to tell all your friends about the program as well. We really appreciate the support. And please check out our affiliate at Movie Scores and More Radio at moviescoreradio.com.